So we have a good selection of saints again this week that we are commemorating, two of whom tomorrow are Francisco and Jacinta Marto, two of the visionaries of Fatima. The third one, Lucia, was much older. She actually lived into her 90s, I think, maybe even over 100, and so she has not been canonized yet, but two of the visionaries have. We'll talk about them again in just a moment. The 21st is the feast of St. Peter Damian. He was a very holy monk who was eventually made, under duress, a cardinal archbishop, and was particularly known for the rigorous standard by which he lived and which he called other people to, particularly in the fulfillment of our duties and in doing penance. The same day is commemorating St. Peter Mavameno, and I just want to read his martyrology entry to you. At Damascus in the year 743, Holy Peter Mavameno, some Arabs came to him while he was ill, and to them he said, "Whoever does not embrace the Catholic Christian religion will be damned as your false prophet Muhammad is," whereupon they killed him. The 22nd commemorates the chair of St. Peter at Antioch. When we talk about the chair, what we mean is the bishop's cathedra. The bishop's cathedra is where the name cathedral gets its place, so we're honoring the establishment of the Diocese of Antioch by the first Pope, St. Peter. The same day, of course, this year is Ash Wednesday, and Ash Wednesday pretty much trumps everything, so we won't be commemorating the chair of St. Peter liturgically, but Ash Wednesday itself. We'll also commemorate St. Polycarp this week on the 23rd. He was what we call a father of the church. That means the first generations of pastors who were more familiar with the apostles. In this case, St. Polycarp was bishop of Smyrna for 70 years before he died a martyr, and he was a disciple of St. John the Beloved himself. When he was told by the Roman judge to renounce Christ, his response was, "You threaten me with a fire which burns for a short time and then goes out, but are yourself ignorant of the just judgment to come and of the fire of everlasting torments which is prepared for the wicked? Why do you delay? Bring against me what you will." And finally, we'll also be commemorating a local feast, which is the dedication of the Cathedral Church on Friday the 24th. It's very similar to what we're celebrating with the chair of St. Peter. There is no local church without a bishop, and so it's very fitting to celebrate the dedication of the principal church of a diocese, in this case, the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception in Thailand. But let's go back to Ash Wednesday. So the beginning of our great Lenten fast is Ash Wednesday, which we're all familiar with, named for that penitential sign of the imposition of ashes. Ash Wednesday falls on the 7th Wednesday prior to Easter. But the reason why that's not the same every year is because Easter's not the same every year. Easter is the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox, which is almost always March 21st. And so that changes, and so therefore does Ash Wednesday, sometimes a little bit later and sometimes sooner. Ash Wednesday and Good Friday are days of fasting. Now, I know we go over this every year, but it's been a while, so we have to review. Okay, so fasting has taken many different forms. The general rule right now is that you are fasting by eating no more than 2 meals quantity of food. But if you eat it in 3 meals, then it's no more quantity. You just spread out one of those meals and break it up into 2, right? So no more than 2 meals worth, but not eating more than 3 times a day. And that's really absolutely nothing, and most of us can probably afford to lose a few pounds. So it's not a big deal. And there's no eating in between meals. So again, it's a very light fast, but as I've said before, the modern church rules are very lame. We can all do this without a problem. Ash Wednesday and all Fridays of Lent are days of required abstinence from flesh meat. Now, while the requirement outside of Lent to give up meat on Friday can be substituted for a different penance, although I know many people don't do that, during Lent it is not an option. And I just want to add from personal experience, both as a person abstaining from meat who loves meat, and from hearing confessions, it's much easier to remember that you should not eat meat on Fridays of Lent when you're never eating meat on Fridays. Just FYI, it's a good habit to be in. But in Lent, it's not optional like it is the rest of the year. I also want to be clear, because it can be confusing language-wise. I know particularly the vocabulary in Spanish lends it to sound like the only thing you don't eat is beef. But it's anything that's not from the water. So no beef, no chicken, no pork, etc. Okay? Just have your fish, or abstain from any protein whatsoever for just one day. Okay? So as we approach Ash Wednesday, then, I'd like to round off this third Sunday of Septuagesima, speaking about the third of our penitential practices, which is probably the most penitential, and that is the fasting and the physical mortifications that we've done. We've already spoken about almsgiving and prayer. And I want to start with something which for some people will not be a penance, but for many people it is, and will also seem a little bit strange as a penance, and that is reading. Yes, the students who know me have already started smirking because they know what's coming. The fact is that reading is not something that many people value. Many were not taught to read, that's understandable, but also out of sloth, many people simply prefer easier means of gaining information. Many have not tasted the wonderful fruits of reading, and maybe have even been discouraged from reading by others who do not value it. But I will also add, for the sake of the students, that when you are forced to read things for assignments and write reports on them and you have deadlines, that can really kill one's desire to read. So please, students, do not let school kill your desire to read. And if it has killed your desire to read, then resurrect it. Okay? But don't let that be an impediment. Reading is very important. I highly encourage you to do so, to make some form of reading part of your penance, because words and a command of language allows us to understand ourselves better, to communicate ourselves better, to share, to understand abstract concepts, and it gives us access to a lot of information that's not available on TikTok and YouTube. So we need to be able to use and value books. So instead of flipping through your phone when you're in the bathroom, maybe have a little devotional or something simple that you can read, as long as you're taking enough fiber and you're not there for too long. But if you're going to substitute or make a sacrifice, or if you're going to make a sacrifice of an activity, for example, during Lent, as I mentioned last time, instead of substituting it for a similar activity, maybe take that time to read the scriptures and something spiritual, or even something fictional. The mere activity of reading can be very valuable. So please consider doing so as part of your Lenten resolutions. You still have a few days to make those. But at Fatima, and in many other places, Our Lady has asked us, in light of what Jesus asks us in the Gospel, to do penance, and particularly we're thinking of the more common areas of doing penance that you're familiar with. For reparation for our own sins, for the reparation of the sins of others, and for the conversion of sinners. And while that's something we should be doing daily, Lent is, of course, a time where we should do so much more in particular. And I find the attitude of the children at Fatima to be a very beautiful example to us. We're going to be celebrating two of them again liturgically tomorrow. And again, Lucia was not, only died fairly recently and has not been canonized yet. But I just want to share, again, from the booklet that I've been mentioning, this text from Lucy, quoting Lucy herself, and the children's attitude towards penance. She said, "A little old woman gave me not only a pitcher of water, but also some bread, which I accepted gratefully. I ran to share it with my little companions, and then offered the pitcher to Francisco, and told him to take a drink. 'I don't want to,' he replied. 'I want to suffer for the conversion of sinners.' 'You have a drink, Jacinta, but I want to offer the sacrifice for sinners too.' Then I poured the water into a hollow in the rock so that the sheep could drink it, and went to return the pitcher to its owner. The heat was getting more and more intense. The shrill singing of the crickets and grasshoppers, coupled with the croaking of the frogs in the neighboring pond, made an uproar that was almost unbearable. Jacinta, frail as she was, and weakened still more by the lack of food and drink, said to me with that simplicity which was natural to her, "Tell the crickets and frogs to keep quiet. I have such a terrible headache." Then Francisco asked her, "Don't you want to suffer this for sinners?" The poor child, clasping her head between her two little hands, replied, "Yes, I do. Let them sing." Another example of voluntary penance from these children was that they found a rope in the road one day. Lucia ties it to her arm just for fun, and later discovers that it was starting to hurt her, and she said, "Hey, we could offer this as a penance." And so they were wearing this rope to bed, but they were cinching it too tight, and Our Lady told them to back off because there needs to be some prudence in our use of physical mortification. But I think most of us are quite far from Jacinta and Francisco on this. I also wanted to end with sharing some points from the life of St. Peter Damian on this subject, like many of the saints. As a layman, as a monk, and as a cardinal, he often did many penances, including wearing a rough hair shirt under his clothes, fasting, which for him meant living on bread and water 4 days a week. On the other days, he only ate legumes and herbs. He never drank fresh water, and he never drank any wine except for Mass. And I just want to add the caveat here. I don't mean at the consecration, because we're obviously drinking the precious blood, but as you'll notice, we use the wine also to purify the chalice. And medicine. That's not an excuse to go through a bottle of wine because you're having a bad day. Okay? Watching, or vigils, where he would stay awake at night in prayer, but like the children in Fatima, he had to learn some prudence in this because he was doing it too much and was having detrimental effects that should have been avoided to his health and his duties, and so he had to be careful of that. He gave alms generously. When he was tempted to impurity, he would plunge himself in the cold river. He wore an iron belt and hit himself with a whip. Again, you have to be careful with those kind of penances, but they are options. He slept on a mat on the floor, and of course, overall, he left the world to become a monk for his own sanctification. Father Butler adds a comment to all of this that these should be practiced in such a way as to avoid abuses, excess, and vanity. That is, we don't do our penances so that other people see them and praise us for them. In order to be true disciples of Jesus Christ, we have to follow him on the Via Crucis, on the way of the cross. It's not an option. Holy Lent is that time of year, while again we should be doing this every day, we do so in a much more diligent way in following him and carrying the cross, and may we do so then for our own salvation and his greater glory.